This is the Wait Just an Infosec podcast, your weekly opportunity to tap into the minds of some of the world's foremost cybersecurity experts. Wait Just an Infosec is a weekly show live streamed on SANS Institute social media channels on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. The show features a wide range of guests from across the InfoSec community. Whether we're diving into the weeds of the latest data breach or exploring the security implications of groundbreaking technology such as generative AI, each episode brings you new insight to keep you engaged in the industry, feed your fire for knowledge, and amplify your value as an InfoSec practitioner. Join the SANS community and gain free access to cutting-edge industry news, cybersecurity resources like technical research, and tools that can't be found elsewhere. Subscribe for free today at sans.org/join.
The ground floor for corporate cybersecurity awareness begins with the users. Or does it begin with corporate safeguards? In this episode of Wait Just an Infosec, join SANS certified instructor Lodrina Cherne for a debate on one of the top Cybersecurity Awareness Month topics. Later in the show, SANS author and certified instructor Dean Parsons joins the broadcast to talk security awareness. Dean will discuss the SANS Security Awareness Maturity Model, top risks to organizations today, and where we go to reduce these risks in industrial environments.
I asked you all a question, and I said, if you wouldn't mind going to slido.com, the poll is still open, if you want to put an answer in. Slido.com, and you enter that number. I asked you, who is responsible for evaluating email links in a corporate environment? Okay, number one, the first answer that came up, we have everyone, all humans. Let's pause there right now. Everyone is a participant in our security posture. I think this is awesome. And if you said everyone, if you said all humans, if you said the user, okay, we're going to talk more about that really soon. If you said the user, awesome. Let's take it beyond the user. Let's take it to everyone. Awesome. I love that. So, by the way, I wanted to point out in the question, there are some very carefully worded things like, who does this in your corporate environment? In your corporate environment. You know, in Cybersecurity Awareness Month, in October, which believe it or not, we're in right now, for Cybersecurity Awareness Month, I hear from my colleagues that a lot of them are getting cybersecurity awareness training. And the number one thing that they are being trained on, that they are being asked about, is to not click unknown links in email. Not clicking links in email. This is like something that in the corporate world we've been hearing for years and years and years. And what is it that we hear for some of us who've been through this training year after year after year? We hear, don't click the links. Mic drop. That's it. Don't click the links. Cybersecurity Awareness Month is over. We've all been trained, right? Yeah? Does everybody agree? Oh, man. So some of you said it's the user who should be responsible. It's the user. It's the end user, the recipient of the email. Okay, so let's talk about this. There is, let me pull away from email for just 1 second. So if you are somebody who is involved in securing your corporate infrastructure, you've probably been thinking about not just email. You've probably been thinking about your whole attack surface. You've probably been thinking about things like the cloud. And if you look into how we are supposed to secure our cloud infrastructure, you're aware of this idea of it being a shared model for security. You're aware that when we talk about securing something like the cloud, big nebulous thing, that it's both the responsibility of our corporate end users and your cloud provider, somebody like AWS, GCP, Amazon. So the idea that we are working together for security is a really, really big concept, right? So I'm going to go back to a couple other folks' comments. So there was somebody who said, I think it's not just the user. So the person who said, yeah, over here in the top left of my screen, you said it's the provider, whoever is hosting that email, whoever is securing the back end, the provider should take care of that. And by the way, they should work hand in hand with your IT administrator. And from there, then we can talk about the user. Awesome. Awesome. I love that. So thank you to the people who are giving us a broader picture, the provider, the IT administrator, the user. We're going back to everyone. Whoever answered that right off the bat. Awesome. Awesome. Okay. So let me think about my world again. And remember, I'm the forensics person. Now, I don't just teach forensics. I am also fortunate enough to have been introduced into the SANS world as a student. So as a student, I've taken lots of forensics classes, leadership classes. I can't wait to dig into other things like ICS classes. And by the way, we've got Dean Parsons coming up who teaches a bunch of our industrial control systems classes in visibility, detection, and response, and another one in management. So as a student in SANS classes, and in particular in forensics classes, I have been a student and I have listened to the instructor up at the front of the room. And, over the course of 6 days of lecture, 6 days of content, there is so much information. And in those classes, just like we're doing here, I would hear a question at the front of the room, let's say in a mobile forensics class, how do we get data off an iPhone? So maybe if there's a couple mobile forensic analysts here, does anybody know how do you get data off an iPhone? Or how do you get data off an Android? How do you do this stuff? And maybe some of you are thinking, well, I haven't taken smartphone forensics. I haven't taken forensics 585. I don't know yet. But maybe if you are a forensics person, you might be thinking about a couple different things. You might be thinking, well, I could do this method using built-in Apple tools. I can use my fancy forensic tools. I can hook up this hardware thing. There's a whole bunch of ways to do forensics, just like there's a whole bunch of ways to do security. Yeah, and there's a couple people who are talking about what these options are. If we're using the example of how do you get data off an iPhone, you can use your forensic tools like Autopsy. You can use your third-party vendor tools, your MDM solutions. Yeah, you can do a little bit of, let's say, hacking and abuse certain protocols. Once you have the data, you can parse your SQLite databases. Yes, I love it. Keep it coming. And I love this. Oh, Elliot has a really great comment. Elliot's got the phone a friend comment. Call Apple. I love it. So even within this group that we've got here today, and thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for chatting. If you love this conversation, you can send the recording to all of your friends after we're done, but hang out here just for a moment. So when we talk about mobile device forensics, yeah, we can do our jailbreak. We have all these different methods. As a student, when I hear a question in my SANS class, I'm sitting there in the back of the room. You know what the most common answer is for any question? For any question that you can ask in forensics, and maybe for some of you, you can expand this to security in general. The most common answer that I have heard that I have given other people is, It depends. So let's take it back to our question that we asked earlier. We asked, who's responsible for evaluating email links in a corporate environment? And we had a bunch of really, really great answers. If you didn't get your answer in earlier, feel free to type it into the comments now. So, who's responsible for evaluating email links in a corporate environment? We had a whole bunch of great answers. We had everyone. We have this collaboration, this handshake of people who are working together. Yeah. And then we also have people who say it's the user, it's the end user, it's the person who receives it, the recipient. You know what? I think that everyone here is right, because I'm going to come back with my favorite answer. And if you're ever sitting in my Windows Forensics class in the back of the room and I ask a question and you raised your hand and you went, Lodrina, the answer is it depends. I would give you some kudos. And I would say that sounds really, really awesome. So let's dig into this question a little bit more, and feel free to type in the chat, because I'm watching everyone's comments come in. This is awesome. So let's talk about a corporate environment. Those of you who work in corporate security, who are responsible for administering or helping secure your work infrastructure, what are we talking about when we talk corporate environment? And let's start with the basics. We have our users' laptops. So I'm thinking host-based systems. Awesome. But we know it's well beyond our end user systems. And I'm going to chime in with one that might be obvious, is it's our phones. It's our mobile devices. So in a corporate environment, we are getting way more into this bring your own device environment. And there are people who said earlier, if I'm trying to get data off something, I'm going to use my MDM solution. That's awesome. There are so many different pieces in our corporate networks, in our infrastructures. That is really awesome. So we even have things like Joe says IoT devices. Absolutely. Thank you, Joe. So we've got IoT devices, Internet of Things devices, things that are pieces of hardware that maybe aren't running our Windows or our Mac OS or our other major operating systems. Things that are communicating over the network, and things that maybe don't have a screen, things that don't have a keyboard. And interacting with your IoT devices is something that we care about when we care about securing our email. And by the way, let me take it back to the real basics of just why do we care about who's clicking on links, good, bad, ugly, or otherwise? We care about if somebody is clicking on a bad link because of this idea of this attacker's chain. You can think of different models like Lockheed Martin's kill chain or other models where clicking a link maybe download some malware. Next step, that malware reaches out to some kind of network connection to download additional malware, to download additional bad stuff, to gain persistence, to be able to not just exist for that one moment, but to really live and persist on those machines. So this is the kind of thing where once you get bad stuff happening on a machine, we can go from that individual system, whether it's a computer, a mobile device, an IoT device. No, I haven't seen anybody yet say servers. When you get that malware moving across your network into your servers, this is really bad, right? Because when you get people from your organization onto your network who aren't supposed to be there, Well, we have all of our headline news, right? What's our worst case scenario? What is the worst case scenario? And let me ask you all, what is the worst case scenario after our users click the link and bad thing happens? When we get to the end of that chain, what is your nightmare scenario? What are you all protecting against? So, this is where, Sinan, incident response is coming into play. Absolutely. And a whole bunch of folks. Ryan is saying an administrative pivot is the worst thing that I can imagine happening in my organization. Yeah, absolutely. Great point. Great point, Ryan. The idea that somebody can get all of the power, technically, all of the keys to your kingdom, technologically. And in my nightmare scenario, the one that I've helped a lot of companies investigate is the nightmare scenario where somebody has that technical keys to the kingdom, and then they take your corporate keys to the kingdom. So the idea that somebody is in your network and they're stealing the secret sauce, they are stealing that magic recipe, they are stealing your intellectual property, your research, the stuff that makes you you. So let's see, there's a whole bunch of other things happening. Joe saying, I can imagine the worst thing happening is that my server shuts down. Oh man. So the idea of loss of service, whether we're talking about, okay, forget about securing email. What if your email's not available? What if your customers no longer have access to your services? Okay, and then a few people chiming in talking about business disruption. Funmilio, yes, business disruption, and a couple other folks echoing data loss, my data getting stolen. So this is the why. So why are we talking about email security? And, for a lot of us, again, it's October, it's Cybersecurity Awareness Month. A lot of us are thinking about pushing training out to our users about evaluating bad links in email and clicking or not clicking. Well, let's really bring it down to why are we doing this training? Because of business disruption, because of a possible ransom. Yeah, Desmond, reputational and financial damages? Ransomware? Absolutely. Yep. So Sinan makes a really good comment talking about defense in depth. I love this. So let's bring this back to Sinan's talking about defense in depth, and let's bring it back to the question I asked originally. Who's responsible for evaluating email links in our corporate email, in our corporate environment? So there's the idea of defense in depth that some of you touched upon when you responded to the poll. And I love, again, this combination of answers we got, where we had people who said it is the recipient of the email, it's the SOC and the security team, it's your spam filters. So it's this combination of your appliances that are scanning email, the people who are managing it, and the people who are on the end user system. And let's talk about defense in depth, which, if you're not familiar with the term, is the idea that, imagine you have a piece of like Swiss cheese right out of your lunchbox. And in that piece of Swiss cheese, you have a whole bunch of holes. So imagine this piece of Swiss cheese is one of your layers of defense. Let's say that you have this really awesome network and email scanning tool, which is part of your defense stack. Well, maybe in this really great tool, there's a couple of holes that this malicious email got through. What's your next layer of defense? Maybe you have a piece of Swiss cheese from somewhere else in the block of cheese, and that piece of cheese has different holes in it. There's still a few gaps, but hopefully when you start layering one layer of defense against another layer of defense, we have this idea of defense in depth. So if your scanning tool doesn't pick this up, maybe the SOC team who's reviewing your email picks it up. But wait, there's still some gaps. And in those gaps, what if we have the next person who comes in? Maybe that next layer is our end user who says, something is really strange here. I don't think that the CEO wanted me to click this link. In fact, I think the CEO is on vacation right now. Why is she sending this email? So, yeah, I love the idea of defense in depth to protect against this. So a few other responses here. Levent has responded, I could see a really bad scenario where we get some malware that's uploading to this channel and the command and control, the CC command and control starts communicating with the attacker and then data's leaving the network. Okay, so let's add yet another layer of Swiss cheese onto our stack, right? We might have our network appliance. We might have our SOC reviewing things. We have our user who's evaluating, does this smell fishy or not? But let's say that your attacker gets past the user and the user does click on that link, starts this whole communication channel, this malicious connection starting off. Well, maybe you have other layers of defense. So as Levent talks about this attack that's progressing, the user clicked, it wasn't detected before that. Maybe you now have different tools. Maybe you have your network monitoring tools. Maybe you have your SIM, your EDR, your XDR that's able to monitor that. Maybe you didn't get the budget for those tools, but you have other network monitoring things. Maybe you realize as you're looking at your cloud bill, gee, there's a whole lot of network activity over here. Unfortunately, maybe if your Swiss cheese is especially holy, if you have really big gaps in that Swiss cheese, and you have a gap on top of a giant gap, on top of a giant gap, on top of a giant gap, you might get to that situation where your data leaks, you make headline news, and you end up in our News Bites segment. So I think that's probably one of my nightmare scenarios, right? So yeah, there are lots of other tools that we can stack on top of here. Ulu says network segmentation and DLP is your friend. And I didn't even touch on data loss prevention, because even if your user does click on the bad thing, well, again, you have other tools like data loss prevention, hopefully in the stack, that are going to protect you, that are going to protect your users. So here's the thing. If we bring it back to the question that we started today's segment with, who's responsible for evaluating email links in a corporate environment? And you can check out from the word cloud here. I think the first answer that came up, which is everyone, seems to be the biggest thing that was echoed over and over and over. So security is everyone's business. It's everyone's responsibility. Awesome. And by the way, this is a theme, that phrase, security is everybody's responsibility, or things like security is a team sport. This is something that's been echoed by one of the United States' top cybersecurity leaders, Jen Easterly. So if you are familiar at all with CISA, who is one of the leading authorities in the United States for helping secure our infrastructure, CISA has put out a whole bunch of Cybersecurity Awareness Month material, just like we're doing at SANS this month in October. And Jen Easterly at CISA happens to always say, security is a team sport. Security is everyone's responsibility. So if this is something that resonates with you, there's a couple of links that are going into the chat right now about if you want to talk about security, if you want to keep up beyond this broadcast today on the latest news. We have a ton of newsletters, like if you want to get news bites every week. If you are the security professional who is not just responsible for securing email, for securing your network, for securing your corporation, but maybe somebody who's involved with trying to secure your friends and family, there are some great resources at SANS, both for cybersecurity awareness. We also have this really cool project called Securing the Human. And we have the Ouch Security newsletter. So these two things, if we want to talk about security beyond just email security and corporate security, Securing the Human is a great thing to share with your friends and family who maybe don't work in security, who maybe aren't getting all of these cybersecurity messages from their employer about how to keep yourself safe, how to keep your devices, how to keep your kids safe, and same thing with the Ouch newsletter. So, before we turn it over to talk a little bit more about security awareness with Dean Parsons, I want to hear, what are some of your challenges in email security? And what are some of your challenges that you have in trying to keep this great big attack surface safe? So what are some of your challenges? Desmond observes that a big problem observed in my jurisdiction is a lack of a top-down approach. So we have this idea of you need corporate buy-in, you need management, and you need your leaders. You need your leaders to understand and have this security buy-in. Great thing to bring up. For a lot of organizations, security is going to be a cost center. So unless you work for a cybersecurity vendor, security is not necessarily where you're going to see money coming in until bad thing happens and you see all the money coming out, right? So some of you are having challenges with management buy-in. Some of you are having challenges with validating. When I see a link, how do I figure out if this is a spammer, if this is an attacker? How do I do that? So, I'm hearing and seeing in the comments that there's different challenges you're experiencing. You're experiencing corporate buy-in, leadership buy-in. You might need some tools. So the idea that you need sandboxes or you need to go to VirusTotal. And how do you do that? So let's see, what other issues are you all running into? Yeah. Let's see here. Some other issues you're running into. You're running into spoofing issues. Great. The idea that emails appear to be from somebody who it's not really. So, yeah, huge problem, right? There's not going to be just one answer to all of these issues. And I've got to come back to the idea of it depends. How do you secure your email? Some of you might be very, very practical, and you might say, the way I'm going to secure my email is by educating my users, because I didn't get any budget for the cool new security tools, or maybe I didn't get budget to come to SANS training this year. And all I can do is do my own internal company webcast and try and get my users to help me out. So again, some of you might have issues with securing your users and securing your email at the corporate level. Some of you might be working at the technical level. So this is always going to be an evolving story. So even as our security posture needs to evolve, let's think about going beyond just host-based systems, which that's my bread and butter, investigating Windows systems, investigating one device. That's what I teach in my classes. Let's go beyond just the host, and let's turn it over to Dean Parsons, Dean who, again, teaches a couple different classes at SANS, including our ICS Visibility Detection and Response classes, and also ICS Security Essentials for Managers. And I was lucky enough to, again, at this same event last month, at our network security event in Las Vegas, I was teaching down the hall from Dean, and Dean's students have these really cool hardware devices that they are hacking on and securing all week. And every time I'd pop my head into Dean's classroom, Dean's students were just like really into their projects. So again, a really great person to learn from. Dean, let me turn it over to you to learn more about cybersecurity awareness.
All right, thanks everybody for joining us on this segment. My name is Dean Parsons. I'm a certified SANS instructor for ICS 515 for industrial controls. I'm also a certified instructor and co-author for ICS 418. Today, I want to talk to you about security awareness. And this is timely because we're coming up on Security Awareness Month in October. So the topic of today's conversation is around security awareness. Now on screen, you do, of course, see the SANS Security Awareness Maturity Model. I want to walk through that very quickly and then lead us down to some questions that we have for you to answer in the comment section and get us to the new modules we've created for this curriculum in this area of security awareness. Now, my background is in industrial control systems, so hint, hint, that's kind of where we're going to head to. So as you look on screen, there's really that designed maturity model that allows us to mature existing or create new cybersecurity awareness training campaigns and programs in facilities and organizations around the world. And this can be anything from, again, starting your program from a non-existent place today, right up to having metrics and a framework, capturing and managing the human risk of security awareness. Now, the question I have is, and I want to get your thoughts on this in the comment section, is this. What do you feel is the number one risk to organizations today? Your options are, is it people? Is it process? Or is it technology? One of those is where we're headed to. So let us know your thoughts in the comment section. Just to repeat, we want your comments. The question is, what is the number one risk to organizations today? People, process, or technology? Dun, 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 here we go. So for the past 3 years, 80% of all breaches have been tied back to some involvement of people. So the answer, of course, is that people element, the people part that has some element to play in a cyber attack, an intrusion, an incident, and of course, a breach. Now, this metric is fantastic from the perspective of where we go next to reduce human risk. So as an example, security now we know is not just a technology problem, but it does include that human risk. But if this is manageable, to reduce this risk across IT organizations and, of course, industrial control systems. And this is what I want to share with you today. The question now is, and again, drop your comments in here and your thoughts on this. So what about human risk as it relates to industrial control system, ICS or OT, operational types of environments, critical infrastructure, power grids, wastewater management facilities, heavy manufacturing as an example, water utilities. These environments absolutely have people in them, managing them, using those engineering assets. So we, of course, have never left out the engineering component in our SANS security awareness, but what we've done recently is drastically lifted that up and updated our modules and significantly added additional modules as well, again, to reduce the risk of human risk inside control systems in this case. So on screen, you see the usual SANS security awareness products we have, and today we're highlighting that ICS or OT piece. So as we talk about the new security awareness modules, I want to keep in the back of our minds here, if you're coming into control systems for the first time, ICS or OT, I really want to remind folks that there's a really great way to start deploying this kind of module. And it's really aligning with the safety culture already in place, which is usually fantastic in control environments. So as we go through this, I want to just briefly introduce us to some of the roles and responsibilities that folks have in control systems and how we can deploy short videos with knowledge checks and a way to track these metrics as we're reducing risks, specifically in engineering environments. So the new content we've developed is really around the 20 new modules and updated progressive modules we've created. Myself and Tim Conway just recorded this in the SANS studio, and we've had a team of folks going through making all of this, all the modules work together. Now, what's important to know about each of these modules is they're catered to different elements or roles within a control system. So the learners can be those who operate a power system, for example, or any critical infrastructure element. These folks can be supporting those engineering environments, but also the modules are for those who manage the risk, the human risk, and the cyber risk of control system environments. What I want to do is just indicate that folks that are the ICS end users, ICS practitioners, even security awareness folks specifically with a dedicated role, or those such as engineers making changes in the ICS environments at a technical level. So that could be anything from process engineers designing and optimizing a plant process. It could be field technicians, programmers, as I mentioned before, and technicians who repair devices and engineering systems in the field. In addition, ICS security folks, network engineers, and even folks who obviously operate the process right to management, those who have the responsibility and ownership and accountability for control system environments. So what we've done is now we're going to introduce you to some of the names of these modules. Now, each one of these modules varies in length, but they're consumable, fast to deploy. And again, they have those knowledge checks, which lines you perfectly to mature your process over time, linking back to that maturity model we've seen a few moments ago. So as an example, in the area of the end users for ICS, we start folks off to know what an industrial control system is. And then we walk those individuals through an attack scenario inside the control system, which, as we'll see in these modules, of course, is different than an attack in an IT environment. And that's what makes these modules so specific to the control system, and I would say so helpful and more valuable to the control system. So we're talking about ICS-specific awareness campaigns and modules. So, of course, we talk about the newest things in control systems and the related risks, anything from ICS removable media right up to ransomware attacks as well. Even real-time case studies we've seen recently in different fields and different sectors of control systems globally. So we talk and go over the attack overview, but also focus on the risk service, how to reduce that, which includes reducing human risk. We, of course, talk about the ransomware aspect and recent events such as Ukraine 2015, 2016, the Oldsmar water event, perimeter attacks, and so on. And of course, we still have leadership, ICS-specific leadership modules as well. And just an example of these, before we get to the last section here, is we go from anything from IT types of attacks that could lead to an ICS attack with spear phishing attack campaigns that we've seen in the real world, right down through things like delivering attacks through supply chain, security awareness, and how to roll these types of modules out to those ICS removable media, such as a USB stick brought into many plants. And as we know, industrial control systems do have a lot of folks like vendors and integrators that support our environments that may come in with those USBs. So a lot of content on practical risks and threats that we see out there, and ways, of course, to reduce those risks as it relates to the human aspect. We, of course, talk about more transient devices. Ransomware definitely raises its head because it's one of the top risks we see today, intruding into IT and industrial control systems, although they do have different impacts in those different environments. And of course, we cannot forget the real-time case study of the VPN filter attack, And really, this case study that we walk through in that module looks at the perimeter attacks and perimeter defenses we can deploy to protect our control system. Leadership is not forgotten here. We focused heavily as well for leadership, those who manage the tactical practitioners in the field. And woven throughout each module, there's distinctions between how things would work on IT versus how things are really on the ICS and the differences between them. Of course, we do not move away at all from safety. That's paramount in all of the modules that Tim and I created for this entire load of modules. So the prioritization of safety is seen throughout as the number one critical infrastructure risk to reduce. And again, to reduce this, it's from the human perspective in all of these modules. So to recap, before we see an image here of the type of training modules you'll see, is these main takeaways right here. We've recently redone, updated, modified, and created new content, 20 plus new live recorded instructor-led modules. So myself and Tim, as certified instructors, we present the content in this way, similar to what we would do in a classroom environment. But we have the addition in these modules to flash up when we're talking about certain aspects, different animations to make those come to life even more, to communicate the educational value and the practical application of the learnings from each module. As mentioned before, these are threat intel based. They're use case driven, which means this is not fluffy pie in the sky stuff. We have seen this before in multiple conditions, in multiple environments around the world, and we've learned from that, and we're sharing these lessons learned and practical risk reduction capabilities with you in each of these modules. As we have just seen as well, you can select the modules for the roles designated in your environments. So it's not just assign all of them to your entire team if you don't wish to, but there's tons of value there. But of course, you can segment this out based on the role. This, as usual with the other SANS security awareness modules, can be hosted with the SANS platform or host it in your own LMS. It's SCORM compliant. You can also brand it with your logo, etc. And again, effective short knowledge checked modules that allows you to do tracking, metrics, and reporting directly that can align with your overall organizational maturity model. Now, just to close out here, and we're going to be looking for comments here as well, or any questions that you have we can address, is that here we have myself and we have Tim going through the production process, recording process, where we have the back-end team putting animations on this, making this more come to life, but it's still that instructor-led kind of scenario. So you kind of have this a little bit of a rapport with us as we're going through and teaching and hopefully helping, guiding, and sharpen the skills of your engineering teams, your ICS practitioners, your users in the ICS space, and obviously, of course, your leadership. So as we round out and complete this part of the piece for today, just a quick note here, myself and Tim, here we are in the studio recording these new modules, and I have to confess, we had a blast doing this. But I also confess that Tim and I and a whole bunch more folks in the ICS curriculum are really obviously passionate about control systems. And so we really feel proud about putting this content together and really hope that you're going to get the value you expect from this. So want to say thank you for connecting with us today. Hope to see you in the future at some events. Again, I teach 515, 418, but I'm usually at any events that we see with regards to ICS. And a final thank you, and be prepared for October, which is, of course, Security Awareness Month. And we're going to make sure you can get some of this content available to you to help with your program in ICS environments. Thank you again.
Thank you for listening to the Wait Just an Infosec podcast. Remember to join us live every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern for a new episode of Wait Just an Infosec. You can watch at sans.org/WJAI. Or go to the SANS LinkedIn or YouTube channels. The Wait Just an Infosec podcast will be released every Wednesday at noon. Thanks for listening. See you next week.